Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty, a Haggerty10 Twitter handle, as you all know by now. And I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Alison McConnell. Morning, Alison.
How are you?
I'm very well. Yourself? Morning after the night before, Alison. A win's a win and all that. But you touched upon it off air there just before we come on. You said it was fraught. I think that's one word for it.
Yeah, I think so. I think at this stage of the season, I think it's about just getting the points, making sure you're getting a win. It's about not offering any encouragement from Celtic's perspective. It's about, not giving Rangers any encouragement, given how slender the gap is at the top. And I think you would want to consolidate that. I think had Celtic relinquished that position after only being there for a week, I think all of a sudden you wonder about what the psychological effects may be on the squad. I think in that respect, it was just important to see out the win and then maybe when you take a step back from it, analyse why you get from a position of being fairly dominant in the game to all of a sudden finding yourself pegged back a bit. And we've seen it a few times this season. Celtic over the past few weeks have been fairly robust, I think, in seeing games out and winning. The game against Rangers, the game against Motherwell were fairly emphatic, comfortable wins, but I thought there were some frailties evident at Pittodrie again in the second half last night.
There was a vulnerability, Alison, to set pieces last night, wasn't there? Defensive-wise, we'll take the so-called negative first. Ange touched upon that. Said he was bitterly disappointed to lose 2 goals to set pieces. I think his phrase was, we get done by set pieces and we're usually better than that. The Celtic defence is usually better than that. What happened last night?
Well, I think it was an area that was vulnerable at the start of the season, last season particularly, and then still evident at the start of this season. I think it's improved in recent months. I think Celtic currently boast, or up to last night, boasted the best defensive record in the league. So you can see that it got more. It solidified over recent weeks. I think you've had impressive performances from Joe Hart, from Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think Carl Starfelt has improved too since coming into the team. But I just wonder about the effects and the pressure that comes, the different kind of pressure that comes when you're at the top of the table, when it's very narrow, when you're aware of the importance of the win, when you're also aware of the consequences of not winning. And I think 2-0 can be a funny scoreline in that respect. I think when you lose a goal, all of a sudden you can sense a shakiness, and I thought that was what happened last night. And I think it will be a source of concern.
I guess it's a wake-up call as well, Alison, that you can't switch off at any time in these games, especially when you're chasing the title. You switch off, that's what happens, and I guess that's what Andrew's kind of referring to. He's always banging on about getting better and improving. That's an area over the next 12 games that will just have to improve, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think once you start to run out of games and you're getting to that point now where you're on a countdown, I think there's a different tension that comes with dropping points, because at some point you run out of road in terms of catching up. But also I think last week was the first time this season that Celtic got on top. They've been playing catch-up since that opening night at Tynecastle. I think that there is a different element that comes into play when you're leading the pack and the lead is just so narrow. I think it's about seeing games out. But I think I'm not so sure if it was a wake-up call as it was maybe a reminder that, it's not all going to go your own way all the time, that there are elements in games where teams will put you under pressure, will ask questions of you defensively. I think at 2-0 up, you should be managing the game better. You should be seeing it out. I don't think you should find yourself in that position where you've been in a fairly commanding position within the game and then it gets very tense and very fraught. And I think there was a quick response last night. I think Jota's goal restored the lead, but when that doesn't come quickly in other games, it can become very ragged very quickly.
Yeah, conversely, Ange saluted the character of his team to go straight up the park and score, less than a minute. It happened in the League Cup final against Hibs. It happened last night. They just have that unerring ability to dig themselves out of a hole, Alison, which augurs well people say that's the mark of champions. We'll wait and see. That'll all come out in the wash in 12 games' time. But big players do big things on the big stage when it matters most. And Jota's dug them out of hole, really, hasn't he, with his performance last night? And just in general, that's why you sign these guys, isn't it? Or why you attempt to sign these guys?
Yeah, I think first point is I think it did show the character and resilience within the team. I think when it goes to 2 each, the momentum is all with the team who have got themselves back into the game. I think you're at Pittodrie, there's a fairly vocal home support urging Aberdeen on. I think you know the atmosphere that generates and the pressure that it generates. So I do think it augured well that Celtic were capable of the response, that the response came so quickly. I think it does point to having big players within this team, and I think Jota over the course of this campaign has more than underlined those kind of credentials repeatedly. I think that might be his 4th goal against Aberdeen. Actually,
was his 4th goal against Aberdeen and his 10th of the season.
Yeah, and I think the other goal at Pittodrie was an important one too, earlier in the campaign. But I do think Celtic as a team look like they have goals in them. They always look capable of scoring. They look capable of creating chances. I think that would be 10 goals from the last 3 games. But just what you saw last night in a defensive sense hasn't really been glimpsed since the turn of the year and the resumption of the league campaign since the winter break. And I think it was just a reminder that there are still areas of the pitch that are fragile at times, anyway.
Now, $64,000 question or the £6.5 million question. Do you think Celtic are any closer to signing him, or do you think just what you've said all along, they'll just have to wait till the end of the season and see where his mind's at, and maybe if they're in the Champions League, that could be the big carrot that's dangled in front of them?
Yeah, I have to say, I know we've spoken about this repeatedly. I've not really changed my mind on it. I think the impetus really is with the player, both with Jota and with Cameron Carter-Vickers. I don't think either needs to be in any rush to come to a decision about their long-term future. I think both will have options come the end of the season, and I think it will be a case of assessing what those options are. And I think you and I, Tony, we live in the real world most of the time, and money talks. I think that is the be-all and end-all. Money talks, and a close second to that is the prestige of the league that you're maybe invited to play in. So I think those 2 factors definitely have a role to play in any decision that's made. I would appreciate the point. I think Champions League football can be a carrot because it offers a very unique platform to go and showcase what you have. It's a very prestigious environment to go and play football, and obviously, of course, with participation in that and from the club side of things comes an injection of finance that's guaranteed and that can maybe bolster any kind of contracts that are coming. But I have to say, I'd be amazed if there was anything imminent or anything came before the end of the season. To me, the power with the situation is with the players, because they know that there will be interest elsewhere and that ultimately the decision is theirs to make. And I think both would know. I think Celtic have made their hand fairly clear. I think both would know that there is an option to remain at Celtic on a permanent basis.
Yeah. Take some comments here coming in. Sneds 1967 says, a win is a win. Poor goal, we lost, but we move on. Cardiff Carroll, similar theme, 3 points, that's all that matters. I'm sure Ange will regroup the players and we go again this weekend. David Bradley, morning David, how you doing? Massive win. Brian Roberts, morning Brian. Champions know how to scrap when it crier. We did that last night. Our Celtic did that last night. Kookaburra comes in, such an important one in the context of the season. And Kim Rigby says, good morning, it was a hard fought win. Yeah, a lot of people feel in the same way as you do, Alison. You cannot underestimate, as you say, the nature of the win because of the slender lead at the top, and it's going to be like that till the end of the season. Now, another point, Alison, Matt O'Reilly got off the mark, or did he? Are we counting that? Is that his goal? Someone said he was a shot on target, so he gets it, even though it was deflected. But he has come in and made an almighty impact, hasn't he? He's been terrific since he came in.
Yeah, I think probably compounded expectations. I think you sign a player from League One and you're maybe thinking, are they capable of going straight in? Are they a first team player? Are they a squad player? I'm not sure. And I think when you factor in just how strong that triumvirate were for Celtic in the opening half of the season, the tried and tested Callum McGregor, Tom Roderick, David Turnbull, you're thinking, well, is there scope for anyone to dislodge any of those three? And all of a sudden now you're thinking, well, what is the strongest midfield? And I would say that stretches further to across the entirety of the starting lineup. I think there are decisions to be made, but I'm sure the boy himself will be climbing the goal. I'm sure he'll be he'll be taking it. But his return so far has been exceptional. I think when you consider the magnitude of the step that he's made and to go in and to make his debut at Tynecastle, I think he went down with cramp in the closing stages of that game, which maybe just might afford you an indication of the step up in tempo and pace that he was coming into. But I think he would have no complaints. I think he would have been disappointed to probably start on the bench for Park at the weekend. I think his return has been, you could only applaud it. I think it's been fairly exceptional, and he looks like a player capable of hanging on to that place and making a fairly compelling contribution from the middle of the park. I think when the games I have seen him play, I think there's a tendency always to get the ball forward. It's not side to side. I think he's always looking for that penetrative pass that can be so important from that position.
Now, more comments from McCune. We can win beautiful and we can win ugly. That's a sign of a good team. It certainly is. And Charlie McGarvey came in here, Alison. He's disagreeing with you here. He says, morning, folks, going to have the temerity. Temerity is the right word, Charlie, to disagree with Alison. A recent article where she states, when Jalen returns, will be a choice between Starfelt and Carter Vickers partnering him. I respect his choice between which of the other two partners, Carter and Vickers. There you go, Alison. What you say to that?
Yep, I would agree with you. I think maybe I think maybe that's come across wrongly. I would agree. I think it will probably be. I think the strongest centre half pairing is Cameron Carter-Vickers and Christopher Julian, and I think that's a pairing that at some point you will see over the course of the next few weeks whenever Christopher Julian is back and properly match fit, when you consider now that he's been 14 months or so without a first team game. But I think at some point this season, getting into the final stages, that is the defensive duo that you'll see.
And Will McMillan comes in with this one. The players looked like they believed the hype last night. Do you believe that, Alison? Do you think players believe their own hype? Or?
I think that's quite a fairly harsh way to look at it. I think in a game like that, when you're pegged back, I think sometimes it can just be a tough game to come out of. I think they started very well. I think that opening half was fairly dominant. I think had they gone on and got a third goal, they would have seen the game out. I think you maybe have to give Aberdeen some credit for not folding when it went to 2-0. They're on the back of a fairly hellish run themselves. They've got a huge game now on Saturday at Fir Park in the Scottish Cup. So I think you have to applaud Aberdeen for not crumbling when I think it would probably have been quite easy to do so. And I don't think Ange Postecoglou strikes you as a type of manager that would allow that sort of mentality to creep into his squad. I think, and I think in particular, this is a Celtic team who have had a long haul to get themselves back to the top of the league. I think you stay there with a bit of humility and hard work, and I think those are the qualities that essentially have come across from the manager over the course of the last 6 months or so.
Tim Anon comes in and says Matt O'Reilly is a cross between Paul Lambert for composure and Craig Billy for dig. There's a comparison, Alison, eh?
He's not doing too bad if he's finding himself on a par with a Champions League winner there and a Scottish World Cup goal scorer after 5 minutes at the club. So, yep, I think he's obviously made his mark and caught the eye, and I would agree. I think he's a young player who looks like a very exciting prospect, very good signing. I think, and clearly what you've seen in this window is players who have come in first team ready. You've not seen projects, you've not seen squad players. What you've actually seen in the transfer window is players capable of coming in and genuinely making a contribution.
And that was a sublime comparison. Here's a ridiculous one, Alison. Hail, hail, Tony Haggerty, the great Ronnie Cray lookalike. Sometimes we inhabit the real world, sometimes we don't. Self-deprecation, I've been called many things. You can keep them coming. Yes, indeed. Now, back in the real world, Jim Stevenson says, give Liam Scales a game against Raith Rovers, a natural left-footed centre half. Speaking of that, Alison, probably make a lot of wholesale changes for that. This could be the game that Julian comes back. A lot of Celtic supporters are hoping it is, just to get him some game time. Would you be inclined if you're Ange to maybe do that?
I think it really depends on how fit he is, whether or not you feel as though he's capable of going in and playing a half or playing for an hour. Or it might be the other side of that. It might be that he's on the bench and he comes on and plays the last 30 minutes or so. I think it is an ideal game to give players who haven't been regularly involved some game time. I think he'll probably be wary of making wholesale changes, just given the potential for a slip up. But realistically, it's a game that Celtic should be negotiating with ease. But as we know in football, that's not always the case. So I think, given the fact that there's a European game coming up next Thursday night, I think there will be changes. And I think Liam Scales is one of the players that you would suspect could be in there for a start.
Yeah, as you say, it's that kind of measure of not underestimating opposition, because you know fine well that you have to play a strong team. You want to contest the latter stages of every competition, and they have played Raith Rovers this season already, haven't they? 1-3-0. So it's opposition they know, but maybe give a rest to guys like Callum McGregor, things like that. I would conjecture that Ange might also do that, because that's 3 games in the bounce he's played with the protective mask. Maybe take him out the firing line for that one, Alison.
Yeah, it would seem like a sensible way just to manage that injury. I think Callum McGregor's shown great fortitude and courage to come back and play while nursing a fracture in 2 places. So I think if it's an opportunity to rest him and let the injury properly heal, then I think it would seem sensible. I think he's obviously coped with the mask. He mentioned after the game against Rangers that there are some visual aspects to it that I think probably your peripheral vision might be affected, given the way that the mask protects the side of the eyes. So I think it's probably not quite as easy to play with it as it looks, just in terms of seeing the whole pitch and everything round about you. If there's a chance to give him a break, I think that would make sense.
Now, one thing that was a bit puzzling last night, Alison, was the absence of Josip Juranovic from the squad. Now, nobody really seems to know what happened, and I don't think anybody had asked Ange before or after about Juranovic. I don't know if he was injured, because he never alluded to that at all in the lead up to the game. I take it we're surmising that he was maybe carrying a niggle, or maybe just rested, rotated, call it what you like.
I would assume that he had a niggle. I think if he's fit, he plays. I think it's as simple as that. Or if he doesn't start, he's certainly on the bench. But you would have anticipated that he would have been involved last night. So I think you've got to conclude that there's maybe been an injury that they don't want to exacerbate by putting him in. And I would suggest the same with Tom Rogic too, the fact that he didn't start either up at Pittodrie.
The buckled Furby comes in and says Joseph took a knock in training. Tony, well, there you go. I didn't hear Ange talk about that. Maybe he did. That's fair enough. If that's knowledge, then thank you for that. But Tony Ralston came in against Motherwell, played particularly well, and he did himself no harm last night again, Alison. He's always ready to step in when the call comes, isn't he?
I think he'll have been frustrated to have found himself out of the team after a strong start to the season when the campaign resumed after the break. I think he'll have been disappointed to have been on the bench, and the same for the League Cup final. I think you know what you're going to get from Anthony Ralston. You've seen it this season. I think his attitude is probably beyond reproach or beyond question. I think you know that he gets his head down and gets on with it. I think he probably will feel fairly hard done by to have found himself out the team, and will be keen then to make his mark on the games that he is in, just to try and impose himself again on the starting lineup.
Speaking of starting lineups, Alison, we'll reconvene tomorrow and we'll have that onerous task again of trying to second guess Ange by putting out our starting 11 for the Raith Rovers game. We got it wildly wrong against Alloa. I think that was the... So with that in mind, I think I'll store that in mind and look at that lineup and see what he did and see if we can try and get, I think, more than 5 or 6, wasn't it? I don't know how many I got. 6 or 7 possibly, but yeah, I don't think I got the whole 11 right, but we'll have a go at it anyway, as we've been doing all season. Thanks for your contribution, Alison. Always enjoy it. Thanks, guys, for the comments. We read quite a few out today. Enjoyed that. And we shall reconvene tomorrow. Have a good day.
Thank you.